Good. Good. Let's see. Maybe.
So let's go, right?
Thanks.
Okay. So we are delighted today to welcome Kristina Engelhard from Universität Trier to the MEPHISTO seminar, which I remind you is devoted broadly to transcendental approaches in contemporary metaphysics. Kristina is professor at Trier University in Germany. She actually wears two hats, I think.
Yes.
She's both an historian of modern philosophy specialized in Kantian studies, right?
Yes.
And you're also a contemporary metaphysician working on the dispositionalist side of the field, on modalities, laws of nature, and also cognitive capacities. And today you will give a talk on your dualistic, powerful, and capacitist theory of laws of nature. And you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really happy to try this talk here in this community because it's recent work. It's really super sketchy in bits, and I'm happy to have specialists in parts where I must say I'm kind of try to do something, but I'm convinced that you are better experts there, and probably I get some input from you. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Okay, so let's start. So as you said, thanks for the introduction. I'm working on powers theories, on dispositionalism, and the powers theory of laws. And the main aim of this talk will be to suggest a new version of that account, and I try to motivate that account in several steps. I don't know how familiar you are with power theories of laws. I think you know basics at least, probably a lot more. But just to have a start, I say the basic assumption of powers theories of laws is that there is fundamental dispositional modality in nature, grounded in properties that are hence causal powers, such that the modality of the laws of nature are likewise grounded in these modal properties. In the debate on this powers theories of laws, several problems have been raised against this theory, and I highlight three of these problems. One of the problems are cases of laws where powers theory seems not to be of much help. There are cases of laws that seem to be such that they cannot be grounded in powers. The second problem is that the account doesn't say much about or nothing about scientific practice with laws as statements, as law statements, and the systematization of laws, of theory construction and theory selection. So it's basically a metaphysical account about law facts. It's not really an account that gives you much saying something about theories and scientific practice. And generalizing on that, you can say that power theories of laws, they kind of lack of an epistemological account of laws. So how do we get to know laws, and what and how can we have epistemic access to laws? These problems have motivated some people, and here's a quote by Kim Tenai, to have a very weird idea, namely to wed a power theory of laws with a best system account of laws. And here's a quote by him. He says, "Once powers are admitted into one's ontology, it makes sense to invoke a metaphysically lightweight descriptive account of laws, since all the metaphysical heavy lifting can be done by the powers themselves. Furthermore, the BSA in particular is attractive due to its ability to achieve continuity with actual scientific practice. The un-Humean metaphysics of properties and the Humean descriptive conception of laws each enjoy independent motivation. So according to proponents of the Powers BSA, it makes sense to combine these views. But the combination also raises many worries, because initially these two theories seem to be really incompatible, super diverse theories that cannot stand on equal ground. And to take a metaphor from Kant, it seems like putting horses and griffins in front of a car to get along the way, and that cannot be done. So my talk is to say something about the Powers BSA account, and then I discuss an objection by Toby Friend, so an unfriendly objection. Then I say something about how these objections to the Powers BSA can be countered if you introduce a new theory, what I call the Capacitist Powers BSA. And then I say something on these capacities, powerful capacities, what they are, and try in the fourth section I try to put some light on how the problems that have been risen against power theories of laws maybe can be solved by the capacities Powers BSA. Okay, so first part, I say something about Powers BSAs and the unfriendly objections. So as I said, the initial assumption of causal power theories of laws is that there is this dispositional modality in nature that is grounded in the properties, and that the modality of the laws kind of stems from that modality in the properties. Now there's the first problem of the problem cases of laws that don't seem to be to fit to this picture, and here are 4 cases that have been discussed in the literature. They are least action principles that cause problems for power theories, conservation laws and symmetry principles, the fundamental constants, and non-causal laws. It seems, and that's the upshot why people bring that up, is to say, but the BSA is a theory that can accommodate these cases of laws. There's no difference actually between these kinds of laws and laws that seem to involve some kind of forces, powers, or things like that. So the BSA is a better theory than a power theory of laws because it covers all of these cases, all laws that you might come up with. The second problem I have been mentioning already is the problem that a power theory doesn't seem to give you much information about scientific practice and the systematization of laws. And here's a quote by Heather Demarest, and she says, "In the scientific quest to discover the laws of nature, scientists routinely look for simple formulas that predict a wide range of phenomena. This emphasis on simplicity and informativeness is mirrored in the desiderata for the best system account, which lends the BSA additional credibility." So again, scientific practice and systematization practices of scientists seem to underscore, to give credibility, as Demarest says, to the BSA. And here's another quote by Kim Ten-Nai. He says, "The laws are efficient summaries of the facts about possible distributions of those potency instances, where the possible distributions of potencies are at W, world W, are determined by those potencies' modal profiles." So they are efficient summaries. Efficient for what and for whom, you might ask. For human cognizers, I would say, in the end. So, okay, and that's motivation to supplement a power theory of laws with a BSA. And that's what some people came up with in the literature. Some people think that already Vetter in 2015 has at least kind of pointed in that direction. I have problems with that. Certainly Heather Demarest tries this in 2017 and very openly. Samuel Kimpton-Nye says that, and some other people. So that's actually a suggestion that some powers theorists have come up with very lately. As I said, you can generalize this second problem and say, powers theories don't say much about our epistemic access to laws at all. Power theories of laws basically tell you the following stories. They are the powers. They they give rise to power manifestations under certain conditions, or always manifesting powers. They are not restricted by some manifestation conditions, whatever. Okay, so manifestations are there in nature, things that you can discern probably, and they give you nomic facts, the law facts, and these law facts, they ground the regularities. And basically that's the story. So, and then the story is over. So you might ask, how do we then have access to the powers, and how do law statements come about? So there's actually something to be told here. Now look at the BSA, and here's a very rough and sketchy overview of what's going on in a BSA. There's this mosaic of the fundamental facts, there's a Roman mosaic from Trier actually, and we have really nice mosaics in Trier. So and here are the regularities that stick onto this mosaic. They give you the law candidates, and those law candidates are part of systems of law candidates, and then you have this cost-benefit analysis or theory choice criteria, and then after this process you come up with, there is a winner. Let's say the system of law 2 is the winner, and that contains law 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the laws 1, 2, 3, and 4 come out as, the laws. Good. So that's basically the view that probably most of you know quite well. Okay, now how do you get from these to a PBSA, a Powers Best Systems account? And here is some early quote in 2003 of Chakravarti, who I think also kind of wants to go in this direction. He says, so what is this understanding of the nature of causal properties that immediately yields conclusions about laws of nature? As a rough opening sketch, to say that an object has a particular causal property is to say that it is disposed to behave in particular ways in particular circumstances, and that all objects having the same property are likewise so disposed. Some of the interactions elicited by these circumstances are experienced by us in the form of detected regularities. These regularities unfold in accordance with systems of laws, which we attempt to map with linguistic expressions, often in the form of mathematical formula. Causal laws are relations between causal properties. The conjunction of all causal laws thus specifies the nature of all causal properties. So here you have some hints that he believes that somehow, we epistemically access the laws by accessing the law manifestations, the regularities that they give rise to. In some ways we experience the regularities. So that's one way of thinking about the epistemic access problem, solving it. And basically what Chakravarti here says is, we have this upper row here, the story that the powers theories tell you, and then you have the BSA story that tells you come from regularities to systems of law candidates, irregularities, you put in the principles of theory choice, and that gives you the laws. Law statements that at the same time actually are law facts, because they are grounded on the mosaic, as Lewis actually thinks. Now what happens? Basically you have this row and you have that row, and you just combine them basically in a Powers BSA. So you think, here are the regularities, there's where the question mark comes up, but then you plug in the BSA story and say, okay, you have the regularities, they give you the systems of laws, candidate regularities, principal theories choice, and then you have the law statements, okay? So what is different here, if you compare this to a classical BSA account only, you have law facts as one kind of entity, and you have the law statements as a different kind of entity. So they're not kind of one and the same as in the classical BSA. So that's one very evident difference. Okay, so here's the person who is very explicit on this account, Samuel Kimpton-Nye, and he says, once powers are admitted into one's ontology, the quote I had earlier, he says, it makes sense to invoke a metaphysical lightweight and so on. The BSA in particular is attractive due to its ability to achieve continuity with actual scientific practice. So and this gives you reason to do this wedding, to do this combination of the two theories, to account for scientific practice. You could also say that this combination of theories also tackles the problem of epistemic accessibility of the laws, and that's also what Kimpton-Nye highlights in his paper from 2021. He says, so in systematizing, that is, looking for strong, simple descriptions of this modal structure, scientists are on the right track to acquire knowledge of the laws. Indeed, this ability to make sense of science as a rational search for laws of nature motivates the Jungian BSA element of the Powers BSA. It allows the view to re-add the theoretical metaphysical benefits of its realist un-Jungian element without the undue cost of rendering laws epistemically inaccessible via scientific methods. So that's basically the idea. But what about the problematic laws problem? Now you can say, since the BSA is much better suited to incorporate the problem case laws, supplementing a Powers theory of laws with a BSA might also solve this problem. As Kimpton-Nye says, so one might motivate the Powers BSA on the grounds that it, but not the traditional view of the Powers theory, can account for global laws and functional laws. Now, the condition of that is that the problem cases would have, nevertheless, to be backed up by powers to enjoy the status of laws in a Powers theory. So if you have this Kimpton-Nye idea, you need powers in the end still to ground all the laws. And you could ask, but are they really backed up by powers, the problem case laws? I mean, that was the initial worry that has been risen, and just by plugging in the BSA, that doesn't give you the grounding you need here. Okay? So, and then it says, in the classical Powers theory of laws, they cannot be grounded if you, believe that there really are these problem case laws. So in some cases you might have arguments that there is a grounding theory to be told, a grounding story to be told. But there are, of course, laws where it's definitely not possible. Okay, and that's what the unfriendly objection by Toby Friend is after. So he says, the aim of this article, his critical article against Powers theory, Powers BSAs, is to say the aim of this article is to demonstrate the implausibility of this response to Law's systematicity. I begin by showing that there are principled reasons concerning sources of explanation and reflected in the practice of science why a BSA and Powers metaphysics don't mix well. As I show, the problem has its source in what the PBSA, Powers BSA, defender can say about the explanatoriness conferred on laws by virtue of being in the best systematization of some or other worlds. Now, the thesis of my talk now is that they do mix well, but the condition is that we have to consider cognitive capacities as causal powers and explain the BSA on the basis of our cognitive capacities. So, and I call this powerful capacitism. So it's the view that alongside physical powers, physical causal powers, we have to assume powerful capacities, which are disposition properties, which are causal powers, and these powerful capacities, they are introduced to ground the heuristic procedures in the end that the BSA has to, that it introduces to make theory choice and these things. Okay, now I want to go in some more detail of the objection that Friend brings up in order to discuss later whether capacitist Powers theory of laws might be in a position to solve these problems. Friend says, for instance, if the PBSA contains a law L, that the traditional approach, traditional power theory of laws, doesn't, because the traditional approach is seen to undergenerate, then some events covered by L may have no explanation according to the modal character of the powers involved, and yet will nevertheless be nomically explained according to the PBSA view. Conversely, and perhaps more alarming, if the PBSA doesn't contain a generalization G, which does follow from the modal nature of powers, then behavior reference in G, and which is explained by the modal character of powers, will not fall within the scope of nomic explanation according to the PBSA view. Either kind of result is liable to make a mess of scientific explanation, since it will mean that the existence of a nomic explanation is not indicative of whether or not there is an explanation in terms of the powers themselves. So he plays around with, how do the laws given by a BSA map onto the laws given by Powers theory? And he says there has to be certain ways of exact mapping. Otherwise, there is this problem that they don't mix well. So there are laws that are not backed up by powers, and then, that seems weird. Kim Ten-Nai himself, he has answered this objection. In my view, he has answered it in some ways kind successfully. Now he says, assume also that all, so he rephrases the same problem in more simple terms, and that's why I quote this. Assume also that all F's are G's is not a law according to the Powers BSA, which is indeed left open given what we've said above, the Powers BSA's law's generation function. It now looks as if we have a situation in which it is nomologically possible, but metaphysically impossible, that there is an F that is not G. This goes against the common idea that nomological possibility is subsumed by metaphysical possibility. So this is just a different way of phrasing the same problem that Toby Friend came up with. And now I think that Kim Ten-Nai answers these worries in his sense kind of successfully, but I think there's something missing here simply in his response. So, second part, I try to show that a capacitist theory of laws of nature, that is a theory of laws of nature, that is a power theory, and a power theory that contains powerful capacities, might be in a situation to address this specific problem. So if the traditional account under or over generates, powerful capacitism does not. The problem case laws that are not backed up in a power theory of laws can be taken to be backed up by cognitive capacities and by some phenomena supervening on some physical powers manifestations. So I'm currently working actually on try to show this in more detail, and later on I go some further steps showing how these problem case laws can be metaphysically backed up by cognitive capacities. And here's some quote by Toby Friend in this article, where that gives me some warrant that there's reason to believe that this might be successful. He says, arguably the symmetries, because he says something positive also on symmetry laws, arguably the symmetries aren't grounded in anything. That's his irrealist account of symmetries, and to be quick on that, because I know here's some people in the room that are specializing on symmetry laws. So I don't share the same irrealist, anti-realist view on symmetry laws, but he has it. So arguably the symmetries aren't grounded in anything. Internal local symmetries, like those of the Young-Mills-Gauge theory, are quite plausibly, redundant features of representation. They don't reflect anything out there in the world. By contrast, global external symmetries may ultimately concern features that the space-time structure of the world lacks. And these irrealist readings of symmetry laws even might be backed up by a capacitist reading of laws. I think it's not necessary, but I come to this later. Okay, now what can we say about Kimpton Nye's response? He also gives some hints at that. He tries to say that our cognitive grasp on causal facts or law facts seems to be relevant here for giving a solution to this problem. And he says, this way, the Powers BSA grounds laws in the modal structure inherent in powers, makes laws knowable in principle, even if there happen to be contours of that modal structure that we cannot know. It is straightforward corollary of that, that there may be objective explanation in terms of powers that are not captured by the laws. So this epistemic grasp on the laws seems to be constitutive of solving these problems. So he talks about in principle knowability here. And this in principle knowability has also been studied by people in the dispositionalist camp. There's a very nice paper by Michael Farah, for instance. But this goes in a different direction. Now, here's another quote that I won't read out for you. You might like to read that yourself if you're more interested. But the question comes up, but what grounds the systematization really? And Kimpton Nye does not provide really a persuasive answer here. He just says, there are these regularities, they are kind of epistemically accessible, but how that solves the initial problem that the laws have to be backed by powers, that's not really part of his story. So can powerful capacitism solve this problem or these problems? And what I want to propose is the following, that these laws, the law propositions or the law statements, may be taken to be manifestations of a collective of cognitive capacities on the basis of a complex epistemic and synthetic process of inquiry guided by epistemic, synthetic, and scientific norms that serve certain cognitive goals. Right? So you have cognitive capacities on one hand, they're guided by those epistemic norms that kind of are analogical to laws of nature that kind of govern the physical laws of the physical powers, so an analog. And these kind of, the two sides kind of are each backing elements of laws and give you, as I hope, the full range of laws that we actually find in theories. So, so there are two kinds of powers, physical powers and cognitive powers, and this distinction gives rise to maybe three kinds of laws. Laws that can be grounded by physical powers alone, maybe that's possible. Then laws that are grounded by the cognitive capacities alone, at least that's a systematic possibility that there might be laws that are only grounded on the cognitive capacities and their norms. And I come up later with the example of bridge laws, for instance. That they seem to be an example of laws that kind of really are maybe just grounded in the cognitive capacities. And then you have mixed laws that are law propositions that are grounded on both, on physical and on cognitive powers. I call them then mixed laws. And I would personally see the symmetry laws in that camp, actually. The mixed laws, probably, they sit well in that camp. You might see that this might seem odd. Can there be physical processes that, according to a causal power theory, are not grounded in physical causal powers, but in cognitive powers? It seems that kind of human cognition, can human cognition bring about how nature evolves? It seems somehow a bit, strange. But I mean, if you like Powers BSA count of laws, that's less of a problem, maybe. Because that's then not the claim that is being made, that human cognition kind of governs nature, to bring up a formulation that Kant might come up with. So, what a capacitist theory of laws might say is that theories and laws, propositions, are abstract entities that are products of human cognition according to powerful capacitism of cognitive capacities. This is also what nominalists hint at. For instance, Whittle, or I don't know how to pronounce this name, maybe you do know, okay, Willis, I don't know. Okay, sorry. So these laws might suit cognitive demands of our capacities rather than being merely about entities in nature other than us. You might think, why, this coming up with this cognitive capacity to solve this problem seems as an ad hoc solution. But I tried actually to give, together with my colleague Fischer, an analysis of the modalities, and that reads out in, just to give you an idea, that P is possible means that there's an X such that X has the physical power to make it the case that P, or there is an X such that X has the cognitive capacity to form the proposition P. So that's an idea that might give you an idea that it's not only in a theory of laws an interesting account to have these two kinds of powers, but it might also be an interesting account in the metaphysics of modality. Okay. It's a paper that is currently under review. So, yeah, I could say something more about this modal account, but I skip that for the time being. And if you like, I can say some more about it in the debate. Okay, now you might want to know what powerful capacities are. It's not such a common account. So, what are cognitive capacities? Cognitive capacities are powers manifesting in influences that jointly, as a bundle, bring about a cognitive act that results in a cognitive product, like a perception, an imagination, a proposition, an inference, what have you. So, and even more complex propositions like theories and the like. Now, these cognitive capacities have two kinds of complexities. There's the horizontal complexity that comes out in this. The horizontal complexity is that, different cognitive capacities have to interact in order to bring about a cognitive product as the output. But they also have a vertical complexity. Cognitive capacities may come in different layers of supervenience relation, including coarse-grained and fine-grained capacities. So you might think that there's a grounding story to be told. So there is a layer of cognitive capacities that we kind of might isolate by whatever I say something more about in a second, so that we identify, but they might be grounded in more fundamental capacities, and they might even be grounded on some, organic processes of the brain, or if you're a naturalist, you like this grounding story. So that's what actually I mean. So the functioning brain kind of gives rise to processes that we can identify as cognitive capacities, and they have to interact in bringing about a cognitive act, and that gives an outcome behavior, cognitive product comes about. So this is a very rough sketch to give you an idea about the structure in which these cognitive capacities probably should be modeled. Okay. What are the identity criteria for these cognitive capacities? How can we identify? How can we count them? We could count them by those acts that they bring about, in which they manifest. We could also think about identifying them by their products that they bring about, or identify them by the laws or rules or norms that either describe or kind of normatively restrain or constrain how they ought to be, how they ought to act. What is important is that the laws kind of make the actions more or less invariant. That's important in a theory of causal powers. There are other theories of capacities. Capacitism is a theory that is currently undertaken by different people, by Kelp and Schellenberg, and here's a quote by Kelp, who brings in capacities in epistemology. Actually, it's an important account currently under debate, and he says capacities, that's what capacitism is. Capacitism is a view that capacities come first, they are explanatorily basic in epistemological theorizing. Other key epistemic phenomena are to be analyzed in terms of capacities. So there's a view there that capacities can play this role. So, and I can, in a capacitist theory of laws, kind of draw onto that debate actually and say, you know, look, there's an epistemology, there's capacitism, and I can kind of take some theoretical devices from that debate. In contrast to these accounts of capacitism, I would say it's important in this theory that they should not be understood as functional entities. I do see that in Schellenberg and Kelp in some sense, but that capacitism, causal, powerful capacitism, is a metaphysical view. It's a metaphysical view that sees capacities really as causal powers. But some people told me, oh, that's what Schellenberg means, you know, well, that's what she wants to say. Okay, and there are other people who also rely on capacities, cognitive capacities, in the debate on freedom of the will, for instance, like Vivella. And I won't read out the quote here, but she also has a bundle view of capacities, the bundle view that there are different capacities that have to interact in order to bring about some cognitive output or actions. Okay, so there's motivation to, you know, it's not an ad hoc thing that I bring in here. Okay, now what could a capacitist Powers BSA look like? What is a capacitist Powers account of laws of nature? The basic assumption is that there is this distinction between physical powers and cognitive powers. Basically the picture is like that, very roughly. So, you know, you could tell the BSA story here, and you can say the physical powers ground the regularities, the facts, the regularities here on that level, and the cognitive powers ground the theory, choice criteria, and all the epistemic things that are necessary for, you know, coming to law candidates as law statements, and the system that in the end wins there. So it's kind of a dual grounding story that grounds the law of facts by physical powers and grounds the law statements by the cognitive powers. And there's room for, you know, intersecting the two things, and that's necessary actually in giving it the full power, this theory. Now let's look at the problem, the three problems. Can they be solved by this account? And I come to the symmetry principles. Now, as I told you, Friend has this anti-realist reading of symmetry principles. Let us assume that this is correct, which I don't. Then cognitive capacitism could claim that these symmetries are grounded on, are not grounded on the physical powers, but on the cognitive powers. I personally would, as here on the slide, say that a mixed view is maybe a better account of symmetry principles or symmetry laws. Symmetry principles. They can be mixed law statements or pure epistemic laws. If we look at a definition, what symmetry is, and now I'm interested in what you think about it. Here's a quote by Margaret Morrison. In what is symmetry? It's invariance under a specified group of transformations. And a quote by, a symmetry is a transformation that leaves all relevant structure the same. So in a cognitive capacities BSA, you could say transformation probably refers to operations, cognitive operations, that vary on structures from an outer perspective. So they vary a system under inspection, so to speak. So that's what is going on here, from very, very roughly and generally. But you could question whether symmetry laws really are a problem for Powers theory in the first place, because they are in realist interpretations of symmetry principles. Powers do play a role. There are several quotes that bring in forces, actually. Like here in Brady and Castellani, symmetries are seen as substantial part of the physical world. The symmetries of theories represent properties existing in nature or characterize the structure of the physical world. So in a realist picture of symmetry principles, you probably do not have this pressing problem. And Morrison even brings in the forces as part of symmetry principle. She says, this conclusion expressed more formally in Einstein's principle of equivalence states that the laws of gravity are such that the apparent forces due to any kind of motion are indistinguishable from gravitational forces. So there is a relation between forces that is, at least in some principles, symmetry principles, an element. So there seems to be good reason to cast doubt on the view that symmetries in physics cannot be accommodated by Powers theory in the first place, actually. Okay, but if you like an anti-realist reading, you can go for the cognitive capacities and ground them on them alone. Okay, so I think I tried something more here, but I think that's not so very interesting for you here. I come to scientific practice. That was the other problem. One interesting property of inquiry, so Kelp writes, the proponent of capacitism and epistemology, he says, one interesting property of inquiry is that it is a type of activity with an aim and indeed a constitutive aim. When we are inquiring into a given question, we are trying to settle this question. The idea that inquiry is an activity with a constitutive aim is of central importance for the present project. In fact, it holds the key to the answer to our question concerning the nature, sources, value, and extent of knowledge. So bringing in capacities might give you some information about that scientific practice is not just some arbitrary thing going on in human societies being concerned with science, but that they are also grounded on cognitive capacities. So if science is an activity of this sort, and it has several constitutive aims, like prediction, manipulation, knowing and understanding the world and the structure it is connected with, this activity is undertaken by human cognizers, and it can be performed in different ways. Now, the theories as system of laws are brought about by these activities of this sort, and they are at the same time very important part of the project of science and aims of science. So what I want to do here is to give you some motivation to think that scientific practice is not only just some arbitrary activity going on, but that this activity going on in science is at least constrained by cognitive capacities in beings like us that we are. Okay, so I come to my conclusion. I think that the capacities account of laws of nature answers epistemic worries against power theory of laws. It can give you some information about, how powers, the cognitive powers, enable us to have epistemic access to phenomena in nature that, on the other hand, are backed up by causal powers in nature. Of course, there has to be. I should say some more about how this is going on. What a virtue of this account is that you don't need some additional theory to make sure that law facts and law statements converge, that they kind of map onto one another, to ground law statements ontologically, and because they already just are. You have the cognitive capacities, the law facts, the causal powers of the physical systems, and you have to tell a story how they can kind of interact, but given that this is possible, then this mapping of the law facts and the law statements is complex, but it seems possible to do this. And this is also, I think, why this account is more realist than the latest BSA accounts, which go pragmatist. That's a really interesting development in BSA theories. We can talk about this in the discussion. Many BSA theorists today give up, at least in my eyes, Lewis's realist account of laws and go a pragmatist route. And these accounts, I think, they lose the realist stance, and that's what a capacities account doesn't. It avoids, giving up realism at that point. Okay, so my thesis is that a capacity is a cognitive power or a bundle of specific interactive cognitive powers which manifests itself in conceivings, imaginings, propositions, or whatever else may count as cognitive output. And that account is desirable supplement to a power theory of laws because it is able to model problem case laws. It explains scientific practice and answers epistemic worries. So, yes, thanks.
5 minutes break. Quick, yeah.
Sorry, I have many, but thank you for the talk. Really, really interesting stuff. But I still don't understand how this new. I see how your position is better than the previous one, but I don't see how it can contribute to the access problem, because I don't see how. For me, one of the reasons I have problem with powers is the empirical access to powers.
Yeah.
So if I had cognitive power, which I have probably a better access, how does it help for the access to physical power, or it doesn't?
Yeah. I think basically, very roughly, I would say, okay, that's basically an epistemological question then, and the powers theory just backs up on that. So, and it gives you a different account of how epistemically we are able to access. So it would tell you something about, what perception is, which capacities are needed for making perception possible, which capacities are needed for bringing about propositions and inferences and the like. So this would be the story to be told here in more detail. Now you can, of course, have two problems. If you are worried that we in principle cannot have epistemic access to powers, then of course, you probably are out of the story. But I would counter that, there are different ways of accessing powers. You could have a, inference to the best explanation. Maybe you could say, it's a best explanation that we have cognitive powers. They're best to explain how cognition is possible. They give you a how possible explanation.
But just to precise,
Yeah.
I worry less about access to cognitive powers. But if I want to know if I had cognitive power to my ontology, does it help me for access to physical power?
Yeah.
That's my question. Because I can understand, you have a good story for neo-Kantian stuff, for cognitive power.
Yeah.
I can buy that. But does it help to the access of the thing out there?
The things out there. So your problem would be saying, okay, we have the cognitive powers, they give you a backing of the BSA, you would buy into that maybe, but then the mapping would be the problem, right? Do I see that correctly? Okay, so where I was really kind of, and then that's automatically done. And you would doubt that this mapping really is done, right? I think...
Without the mosaic, because in BSA we buy the thing because we believe that there's such a thing as mosaic of facts.
Yeah.
So there's no power there at all.
Yeah, there's no powers there.
But if you add this mixed version, okay.
Yeah. I would think that a full-blown account would have to tell you something. For instance, take perception. Like that perception is in a way in interaction of physical powers and cognitive powers that they have to interact in order to bring about perception. And then you kind of enrich this account with more information by different cognitive capacities to give you a story how law statements on the basis of perceptible data come about. So that would be, I think, that would be the project too.
So I naturalize the cognitive powers, and because I naturalize them scientifically, I can get to the... I see the story.
That's at least, I think that's how the model would work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That was very interesting. I'm instinctively quite attracted to this account, but I have many questions on how it works. So one of the things that was not very clear to me is, it's just a short question, is a cognitive capacity the same as a cognitive power? Is that just a synonym? And we just use another word because it's...
Good question, yeah. So the full story would be, I can show you this slide to answer this, that one. So it would tell you that maybe if this is a fundamental level, and you can think there's some supervenient story that there might be supervenient cognitive capacities that we have epistemic access to. So maybe we don't know the causal cognitive powers really. So maybe only we know some supervenient cognitive capacities, right? So maybe some more coarse-grained structures that are constrained by the laws of logic or these epistemic norms, the synthetic norms of inquiry and everything else. So maybe that's very coarse-grained structure that we actually can grasp in a powers theory. Then there would be a grounding story, and then say ultimately, but there are causal cognitive powers grounding whatever we actually have epistemic access to. So that would be at least the model, right? So the causation would be brought about by kind of, the fundamental level. And then, of course, you would say, you would actually have two options here, right? You could, that's, I think, more attractive actually to really think of a dualist account of properties and to say that there really are cognitive powers that are on top of the physical powers, and then you have all the things coming up with emergence actually. If you want to ground them further on the brain, then you have emergent properties. Of course, you could also say that the cognitive capacities ultimately ground in some organic powers of the brain, and that would be more naturalist account then, of course. But I would personally be more attracted on an account that has an emergentist account of cognitive capacities. Yeah, that would be my guess.
Yeah. And a second question, just for clarification, and then I'll leave other people before asking more critical questions. Are these capacities supposed to be seen as merely descriptive or something, or do they have a normative aspect to them? If I have less capacities than somebody else, or other capacities than somebody else, are my laws different? Or is this something like like logic capacities or something that we ought to have, but maybe not everybody does? Do people, do entities from Mars, not Mars, some other galaxy, would have other laws because they have, what's the descriptive normative thing here?
That's so interesting thinking about that, this really, right? So, I would agree to what you said. If you think that there are cognitive beings and they do have a specific furniture, so to say, right, of capacities, then of course it's possible that there might be other beings that have different capacities, also different cognitive capacities. Other thinkers have come up with, this thought that this is possible, and given the capacities we have, we seem to be normatively bound to certain principles, laws, and this is also a very important part of the project of thinking about whether all these norms, all these laws are normative in a strong sense, like the laws of logic, for instance. Are they kind of normative, or are they more strongly, are they really independently descriptions of structures in some ways? And if that would be the case, how do our cognitive capacities relate to these structures in order to normatively being bound to them? So that's all open questions, but I think, nevertheless.
Yeah, but it seems important. I mean,
yeah, it's important. Absolutely.
I mean, if I have some mental handicap and I can only think 2 inference steps ahead or something like that, or I can only do 2 inference steps, so my capacities are limited in some kind of objectivist sense, or no, in some kind of like descriptive sense, less. And you don't want to, I guess you don't want to, with a Kantian kind of view in mind, say that those people have different laws or something because they are mentally enabled. So there seems to be something like, maybe people who have developed totally different science because they have different way of perceiving the world. In principle, then it might be attractive to give them different sort of laws. But the first case, you might want actual good things built in the model to get rid of these sort of very fine-grained distinctions in what a law is. No?
No, I mean, the account certainly would say that take the laws of logic, that they would be definitely normative on, how we should think in science, right? So that is definitely, in that sense, normative. It might be even, as I said, be more strongly grounded in some structures. I don't know how to think about this in this account, but that definitely normative. So a being that lacks the ability to perform certain cognitive actions. This person might be excluded from scientific practice then, because he or she cannot, draw these inferences that are necessary to do science, which might be sad, but that seems to be practice that we actually do, right? So that's what's going on in school, what's going on in universities.
It's still the same laws of nature hold for that person, no?
Sorry? Still
the same laws of nature hold for that person.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar problem that Alexandre Guerre came up with, the mapping or the intersection problem. But you need certain capacities, or you have to be able to follow the norms of cognition, of inquiry, and doing science, and being able to track the true laws. But that makes sense to say that in some ways.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I have another clarificatory question that follows a bit on Peter's first question. Do you need an emergentist kind of view? Because it occurs to me that if there's too much reduction, then I start to lose. I worry that this collapses back into an account that doesn't have cognitive powers in it, right? That it's just you rearrange some boxes, but if there really is a complete reductionist story, what's at the bottom, it's all physical powers anyway. So any objection that I could formulate against a pure physical powers view, I might have to repackage it. It might be hard to slide it around, but eventually I'm going to be able to repackage it against this view. Unless if there is some genuine emergentism, then cool, we can break that symmetry a little bit.
Yeah. I think that's why I would prefer this, the emergentist. I would have the same worry. If you're too naturalist and ground the capacities on some physical, that might be, collapsing. Yeah,
cool.
right.
Okay,
That's the reason.
Cool.
I'm thinking about cognitive capacities because that could change the interpretation of the symmetry. So do you integrate in cognitive capacity the kind of language we have access, the kind of math we have? Because you could say that some things are not expressible or thinkable before we get that kind of math accessible. Would it be part of the cognitive capacities?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's a realist interpretation, or even Van Frazen, the anti-realist one, because if you could argue that the redundancy in the representation is because we don't have the math to express the real thing, it's objective. It's because we don't have the capacity. So it's not in the physical disposition, but it's in the cognitive one.
Yeah, might be the case, right? That there are laws out there that we will never have access to, right? Because we can't. We just can't. We can't have the
But this one is
language
it's even stranger. It's because let's imagine that nature has nature is non-local, blah 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 blah. And so we introduced the gauge theory to have this localized description of quantum field, blah blah blah. We introduce it because we cannot express what would be a non-local blah blah blah, even if we think it's what there is outside. So it's a constraint of us, but we know that we should not do it, because we have clues from the world that the world is structured this other way. So that would be an interpretation of the gauge symmetry that would be not pure anti-realist because it's realist about our own capacities, but it's not just based on physical powers. It's based mostly on cognitive powers.
That would be very interesting. That's something that I wouldn't be able to really control because I don't have the physical knowledge.
It's just that
but that's
I published that 20 years ago and nobody cares.
In your dissertation?
No. It was in one of my first paper. I argued that, and it sounds too anti-realist. So everybody was saying, no, it's anti-realist. But of course, if you're a realist about cognitive capacities, your framework, it would be realist.
Yeah, it would be realist in some ways, realist at least, right? Yeah, I mean, of course, there are realists who still don't like it.
David Wallace, I know.
No, still, but that's a different story.
So you say cognitive capacity is not just the structure of the brain. It could be also culture. It could be all kind of stuff. Language we have access to.
Yes.
So that will cut your example. That would go to your example. Other communities with other tools could develop different laws. Right. To describe the same.
They could develop different laws.
Different structures. Systems of laws. Okay.
Yeah. There might be basic constraints given that we are human beings, for instance, right? There could be this, my favorite example is, Star Wars creatures, some totally different cognitive creatures, and we might not even know what they're talking about, even if we would have some translation, because we can't cognize what they're cognizing, So,
I have a good question, but it's on the very same topic. Do you think, just to be clear on what Alexandre was saying, that we can evolve in our capacity to cognize things, that we can change or we can learn to think or to use new mathematical tools and so on? Okay.
Yes.
So they are not those capacities, they are not hardcore wired in what we are? Or,
no.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So
you even have to think of evolution. I mean, the human species has an evolution, and this will go on. I mean, in 100,000 years, our brains are, we are kind of flexible beings in our setup. So we don't know what we will be cognitively be able to cognize, or no more be able to cognize. It's also possible, that there's a degradation of our cognitive capacities, even possible.
But But I open the critical part of the discussion now. In that sense, if the law status of those propositions, the law statements, is grounded on our capacities, it means that what counts as a law in some culture or so in some historical area and so on may not count as a law later on, or that's it. So laws change in that sense.
The law statements that we hold as true, they might change. I mean, it's a description, right? I mean, theory change is just it's just a fact. Theory change is a fact. What this account also gives you is a story of why it still makes sense to say that former theories are not totally wrong. They are kind of partially, or kind of what's that? Theory dynamics kind of is approximate, truth approximative. Hopefully, I mean.
But then I'm confused about why you talk about grounding in this case, because what is grounded here is not a law, but a belief, or I don't know, some kind of historical or theoretical product. But
yeah, so the idea would be that these two structures kind of there's some mapping going on here, and this mapping changes over time. Maybe there are better ways of mapping and worse ways of mapping, and that would allow you to even have an approximation story about scientific progress, for instance. You know, that classical mechanics, it has a grasp on facts, but this grasp on facts is limited. You know, it does tell you something about facts and powers that are in nature, but you know, it's less adequate than contemporary theories, at least. Okay. But maybe the story goes on, and mapping will even improve, and so my hope even is to give a formal account of this mapping function. Maybe you can, that's my idea, to spell that out in formal terms. So yeah, that's the...
Yeah, I want to push back to the reductionist fear. It doesn't seem to be... I think it's actually quite nice that you could stay quite open to this possibility of it being a reductionist in the end, because it plays a different role. Even if all these cognitive capacities can be reduced to mere physical powers, then still they play a different role, because the physical powers, as I understand it, but correct me, of course, it's a clarificatory question in the end, they are stable to some extent. The physical powers, of course, the world changes, but they don't depend on who is perceiving those laws or who is making the law statements, right? Yeah. While the other ones do. So even if they can all be reduced, they still play a different role, and they have different stability properties, it seems to me. So whether you have to be reductionist or dualist or emergentist or whatever, doesn't seem to change deeply the power of your story, as I understand it.
I think that's true in a way. So it depends on what you think, how the capacities actually should be counted, how they should be identified. If you draw on the rules or laws, then you might have a more reductivist or naturalist account, actually. Then you could say, you know, the capacities, they are not emergent properties, there could be forms of reduction, but then you need some strong views about the laws or the norms. Then they must, in some sense, be invariant, I think, to really give you identity criteria. Then you might say, you know, there are these like the laws of logic, that there are structures in some ways out there, then you would have stable identity criteria for capacities, even if they would be reducible.
Well, I'm not sure whether I understand that. I mean, it seems that there is some indexation that's necessary here, where the law statements that you're grounding are not just laws as we perceive them, all F's are G's or something like that, but like all F's are G's for somebody, right? For some cognitive agents. And I mean, that's unavoidable because there's somebody's cognitive capacities, right? You cannot otherwise, I mean, if it's not linked to somebody, then how are we to know, how is it to be specified whose capacity it's grounded on? So if it's indexed on an agent or something like that, some cognitive entity, well then you don't want invariance, because it has to be dependent on this
relativized
agent, right? And that's only for the top level there. That is dependent on the indexation, and the bottom one.
This one.
The before one too. I mean, it's the same levels, right? The first one can be completely independent of this indexation, and you don't need any you need invariance for because that should not
giving the
depend
necessity of the law.
Right. But then the top level doesn't need any kind of invariance. It can be very like relative to who is perceiving.
That's
right?
true. That's true.
So then it seems to me that even if those cognitive powers can be completely reduced to the physical powers, still, because there's the indexation in the top level, while there's none in the bottom, there is no like they're not like being reduced to each other in the picture. They have just a different role to play, even if they come from the same grounds in the end. No?
But if you're skeptic about physical power, you don't see a danger of because your answer was specifically against
his collapse,
against the possible
worry.
collapse. If you're already skeptic about physical power, how reduced cognitive power will help. So you don't see that problem. You say functionalism, it's enough. They have different function and.
I didn't understand him like that. I didn't. So you're skeptical against the blue grounding story?
No.
I'm not skeptical against anything. I'm just. I think it's kind of good that it's open to be that somebody who would say that these cognitive powers are just reducible.
That's what I think is attractive at the account. There are different ways of spelling it out. And there is a naturalist option, definitely. That's what I think. I mean, it has to answer the collapse worry, actually, I think. But I think, maybe there are ways to avoid this. I would agree. Maybe I think it's less attractive in the end, but for instance, given the account of modality that that you can have, the analysis of modality that it gives you.
You still have to put it in, right?
Maybe.
It's not reducible in the sense that you would not formally be able to reduce it because it's formally a different form.
Maybe that's true. I don't know.
But Daniele was.
Oh yeah, go first.
No, go ahead.
Well, the internet is a magical place. I have Toby Friend here.
Oh, you really?
I really do.
Yeah, really.
And so allow me to begin to quote. So what I find difficult about all PBSA accounts is a willingness to embrace the idea that there are modal features of the physical world that are just excluded from what we get to say we're interested in discovering. I don't think scientists working in the foundations of physics would like to be told that they're not in fact concerned with the fundamental nature of reality, but only with what our cognitive capacities are looking for because of biologically contingent features about what our limits are. No, physicists want to know what it's really like down there, and we design new forms of experimentation to find it out. We try to break free of our limitations because we want to know what it's like at the very bottom level, even if that means our cognitive capacities have to be modified or overcome. So to defend a PBSA, including the Capacities version, you must deny this, I take it. Physicists are somehow deceiving themselves if they think their project is how I just described it. Isn't that a problem?
No. The answer is no.
Naive realism.
No, I think there are really good reasons to believe that our cognitive capacities are naturally aiming at truth. And that it's not at all that the cognitive powers are only grounding the laws. That's what I wanted to say, right? That there has to be this a story about this mapping, and the mapping, I think, is also grounded in our capacities being, aiming at truth. That's really super fundamental. And that's also a naturalist. There's a naturalist story to say that. If we would be beings, idealist blobs, we probably might not have, survived in nature. So, I think there are good reasons to believe that we naturally aim at truth. So.
I guess I actually wouldn't. I'm gonna push back. I'm gonna devil's advocate this. I want to push back here a little bit just to say. I mean, I completely agree with you about medium-sized dry goods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I start to worry about that story if we're talking about the bottom level of physics.
Yeah, but our predictive powers here are really good. I mean, isn't that reason enough to think, it seems really reliable. I mean, our methods seem to be reliable predictors.
No, now Toby's actual response. But if there is a mapping, then cognitive capacities aren't redundant, so they must shape the laws. But physicists don't want our capacities to interfere.
Don't they? I mean, wouldn't they agree? I mean, the outset of our experimentation procedures, our, instruments, detection instruments, must in some ways be adequate for our capacities to grasp the information that they give us. I mean, if there would be a random machine, we find that in Sahara, some machine, and we think, oh, that seems to be a machine that is a detection machine for something, but we are not able to grasp the information that this machine gives us, and it's in vain. So, and I think that's possible, right? So, I think it's a natural way of thinking about our experimental procedures and instruments and methods, that they have to be adequate for our capacities that we actually have.
And last but not least, Toby says thanks.
Great, that is great. That's wonderful.
So basically, in this picture, we can talk about true theories only in reference to defined set of cognitive powers, basically. I take, for example, the example of phlogiston theory, and substituted by oxygen theory of combustion, and like that, for example.
Yeah.
And we should say that in some sense they are both true theories. So a concept of absolutely true laws is not allowed in this framework, right?
So there are law facts, that's for sure, and they definitely are the truth, right? So, but the law statements, yeah, maybe. I mean, they are approximately true in more or less ways. Yeah, maybe. Maybe, and I mean, you could think formally that you could formally say, think of ideal conditions, ideal methods and ideal principles of cognition, ideal setups. Then there is an ideal set of law propositions that at the end of history kind of comes out as true. And then the mapping is ideal mapping. But yeah, maybe we never come to that.
Okay, yes, so maybe I don't have very clear what law facts are. What can it be an example of a law fact?
I mean, that's a law fact in that account in the Powers theory of laws is a generalization about manifestation patterns of powers, actually. So that's a law fact.
So it is something that in that scheme in the slide stays at the level of the R. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. That would not only be regularities,
So regularities.
but yeah, law facts.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a mosaic down, it's because we're used to the BSA, it's powers.
Right.
No, it's a
Maybe the
mosaic.
mosaic should be. Yeah.
But it's a mosaic
out
of
at the-
powers acting, it's not exactly the
sorry.
mosaic we have of facts.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, it's a dynamic. It's a dynamic thing. The mosaic is misleading in the picture, right? Because that's sure, necessary connections.
Yeah, I have a question precisely on this figure. I think that if I were to accept cognitive powers in a theory of laws, I would like to allow for the cognitive capacities to bring a priori principles to the activity of theorization.
So the real full-fledged Kantian idea.
Because here, in your schema, you have to select among the worldly regularities, right? And what is related to the cognitive capacities are only the criteria to select them, right?
That's one way of putting it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's one way of putting it. You could go a stronger way in saying, there are these really, strong a priori principles. That's what I was, hovering a bit about. I don't know whether I would be positive about this, whether there are these a priori structures. I mean, would you have an example of
for
such an a
instance,
priori
I don't
principle?
know. For instance, when I say a priori, I don't mean a priori true, not necessarily true. I mean just something that you don't find out there in experience, but that your reason or your cognitive capacities can bring to the
in
activity.
that sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And for instance, I don't know when Galileo said that when he was searching for the law of falling bodies, and he said that whatever this law is, it has to conform to the principle of homogeneity of equations, for instance. That's, a criteria, not a criteria, a principle that was not at the time factual in its meaning. So if I were to embrace this kind of account of laws, I would like to give more powers to those cognitive powers.
I mean, the question here is the status that these a priori principles have, whether they kind of flow from the powers or are somehow independent from them. And that's an important question, because you make claims about the status of the laws of logic, for instance. And if you bind them really strongly to the capacities, then you have worries that of psychologism in logics. So that's a really interesting but very hard problem, I think. But you can go either way. I mean, you could go the psychological way and say, you know, the laws of logic, the principle of mathematics probably are really flow from the capacities, the human capacities. And you can kind of say even more on that, but you could also say they have some independent status in some ways, but our capacities are such that they can introduce these structures as being normative for them, you know. So it's a question which way you want to go there. So
I want to go transcendental.
you want to go transcendental. Yeah, but you only need a priority. Then you don't need the psychological way, right? So you could even say, you know, there are these principles that are independent from experience, mathematical structures, logical structures, and our capacities are such, luckily, you know, that we kind of can adopt them as being normative for us.
So you would make the difference between something like we are limited because our brain has evolved in a certain way, constrained, and something like laws that cannot be expressed in any language cannot be laws, which seems not to depend of our evolutionary pathway.
Yeah. Yes.
But they will still be cognitive constrained, both of them.
Yes, I think. Yeah, and even, I mean, if we assume that it's possible that other cognitive beings are possible, still they would need some language, they would need some representational structures to bring about law statements, you know, whatever that is in their setting then. So, but yeah.
I have another
No.
other question for clarification. You mentioned the word propositions a lot, and I don't know that I always understood what you meant.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Especially when it was the outcome of cognitive acts. I don't know how you can come up with produce a proposition, or what the value is of producing a proposition. Maybe in propositions, as I understand it, in a sort of Freudian way, I don't see it as a production of any neither.
That's why I took statement. That's why there is an S, statements.
And it's a statement that we just think about, it's like actually assenting to the proposition, as Williamson would say it. Because I can see a capacity coming up with as an outcome of certain propositional attitudes, some beliefs or some, but this very metaphysical kind of layer of propositions, I don't see it how it is an outcome of us.
If you
like an inference, I can see I come up with it, but
yeah, that's what I also have been thinking about. So that's why I kind of tried to be very neutral at that point and came up with this expression sentence, which maybe is assent to some proposition. But what is important is that it is a representational structure. It's representative. It's meaningful. It involves, if it's meaningful, it involves certain cognitive elements, actually, like and everything. So, I mean, it's a decision. I mean, you can have different views on what propositions are, of course, and not everyone is a Freudian about propositions, but but I would try to hold the account most as neutral as possible to different accounts of propositions. Maybe there are ways of spelling, there are accounts of propositions that this account cannot have, but I don't know yet. I don't know, isn't it Lewisian to think that propositions are sets of possible worlds, right? So I don't know how you can map, how you could have that, but maybe, yeah, I don't
That's
know.
definitely not an outcome of a cognitive process.
Well, not in the Lewisian sense, but I give you my analysis of possibility. Then it's kind of a fictionalist account. And these worlds are kind of could be fictions. Cognitive.
Then still,
products.
It's an infinite set and so on. So how can I ever produce that?
Yeah, but you don't need to have to produce them. It's just possible.
Okay.
It's just you have the ability to bring it about, and that's enough.
Right. I see.
You don't need to manifest it. It's just having the capacity.
Yeah, but do I even have the capacity? I mean, that's actually what I wanted to know it, because it seems quite important for the grounding thing. Like, what is it you're grounding? And you put at some point this step from going from laws to law propositions in one slide. If you could go a bit back.
Yeah.
And that was quite remarkable. Like, we were grounding laws and then
okay.
law propositions. If the cognitive stuff is involved.
Yeah, maybe that was a bit quick, right? Yeah. You mean that slide, right? This one?
No, it's even a little bit more back, I think.
I don't know yet what you are thinking
I'll
of.
see if
Yeah, I agree. I did say something about propositions, but as I said, here's law statements, and that's
Right.
kind of your right. So
And
I
these
want to
are
stick to that one.
things. These law statements are linguistic. They have the same syntactic structure and so on. Okay. Okay.
Sorry, Alexander.
Yeah. I was wondering if we can really say that regularities only depend on physical powers, in the sense that, for example, when we use highly technical apparatuses, the possibility to envision these regularities comes at least in part from our knowledge of the theory of how these apparatuses work, of the function of these apparatuses. But more specifically, I don't know, for example, in the case of neutrino oscillations, in that case, to observe regularities in the neutrino oscillations, we need to know the theory of beta decay, and also another case could be the fact that another element could be the fact that when we actually look for regularities, we basically try to build models of data. For example, we have a certain dispersion of data points and we try to fit them with some kind of curve. The possibility to obtain a certain curve, therefore a certain kind of regularity rather than another one, ultimately depends on the uncertainties we adopt, therefore on the number of parameters we are willing to put into this curve.
Mm-hmm.
So, can we really say that regularities only depend on physical powers, or there is still at this very low level an element of cognitive powers.
Yes, yeah, thank you. I mean, there's a lot in there, what you said. I mean, a powers theorist would definitely say that the powers they bring about regularities. That's what they do. And what you hint at is saying that given the detection apparatuses we have, it seems that our grasp on data seems to have an influence on these regularities in ways. And I would agree. I mean, maybe there are different layers of different kinds of regularities there. There might be, the kind of really cognitively independent regularities that are just out there. And in some ways, these detection apparatuses, they interfere and interact with the physical powers. Of course, that's what they do. I mean, that's what they definitely do, giving us data. And these machines are built by us to make things accessible that wouldn't be accessible for us otherwise. So the representation, they give us representations of, there are certain forms of representations of more fundamental regularities that we believe are still out there, even independent of us cognitively having a grasp on them. So, and you came up with a curve fitting examples that are really nice. I mean, because curve fitting is a procedure of idealization. I mean, they give us regularities that highly depend on cognitive capacities, right? So, so there must be a kind of more richer structure of different layers of regularities where these two kinds of powers kind of interact and where representation plays a role. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's less a question, more a comment, is because I think your account answer what my main objection against power ontology, so it's a good thing. But my objection is it's only me that have this objection. So the objection is against Bird, and I discussed that with Alexander a long time ago. It's that when you buy the power ontology, you already buy a certain conception of time. Because there's a order relation between condition and manifestation. So it excludes a priori a science that would say time does not exist or time blah blah blah, which to me is a weird constraint on science a priori, that there cannot be a science that says time is not fundamental at all. However, now I look at your thing and I say, the time constraint could be not in the power downstairs. There could be weird, bizarre stuff that I difficult to understand, but potential, I don't know. But the time order could be the cognitive one. So we cannot do a mapping of whatever it is downstairs without ordering thing in a certain way because of what kind of being we are.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Kantian answer. I mean, time is
but it was too strong in Kant. Here it's more dynamic.
That's,
So, but on the other hand, after that, you have to have a very different account of what are powers, physical powers, if time is not there. Or potentially not there. At least no special ordering, let's say.
No temporal ordering.
Would you be ready to admit non-temporal acting powers in the world at the fundamental level?
I mean, the account has resources to do that. I mean, what is of course important is that the basic structure, that is power, this power can in some ways be, latent, not manifesting, and that there have to be certain conditions in order for it to manifest. It could be that these conditions always obtain and the powers always manifest, that's possible. I think this basic structure should in some ways be upheld in order to be power theory, and I think it's also persuasive in many ways. But it's not important that these are temporal structures. I don't know, maybe it's a constraint by our cognitive capacities to only being, able to cognize these structures as temporal, maybe very strongly in the Kantian sense, really constraining conditions for us making sense of these structures, but
But at least if time or order is at the cognitive level, we can speculate. We can do a science of non-temporal stuff.
Of alien structures.
Alien structures.
Alien structures,
Because if it's already down, like in Alexander Bird's, you already solved the problem of time. It's there since the beginning. It's the problem of change. That's it. It's here. It's a becoming. Period. You buy it at the beginning of the inquiry. It's not it cannot be the result of the inquiry.
I think for that problem, this analysis of possibility is really important. If that works out, maybe you like it. Where do you have it? Because that's then.
Your formula about. It's in the world or it's in us.
Right. So that makes it
existing peak.
Exists. So you could say, it's
the result of a power.
Alien structures are definitely possible. Because they might not be physically possible, but they are possible because we, in principle, if there's only some being that has capacities to represent these structures, then they're possible.
Okay. What do you mean by they may not be physically possible?
They might not even be physically possible, because we can think of a world that differs in its law setup from our world.
Okay,
And we even do not know whether this world is ours or not. I mean,
I'm just showing him in your formula. So if it's not there, it could be here. That's what she said.
No, that's what I mean.
Just a quick last question. On your last slide, you said that compared to the pragmatist account, pragmatist BSA, you were more realist, right? Just to be sure, the realist part of your account is are the physical powers or the facts?
Also the capacities. They are real causal powers. They bring about change. That's why whatever changes, they, And it's such an interesting development in the BSA camp that they have now this pragmatist. It's so interesting and weird, I think.
Okay.
Maybe. Well, I'm just interested in this formula, this disjunctive thing. If you could go back to it, maybe it's not worth. I mean, I don't know how serious you're about that.
I'm so serious about it. I'm so serious about it.
It seems kind of simplistic, but
I really love it. I would
just
die for it. Here it is.
I mean, I do find it like interesting that the disjunction would be a consequence.
The disjunction, many people don't like it at that.
So well, in general, disjunctive definitions are like another very good sign, right? That you're capturing something interesting, right? That's
Yeah,
Is-
so
is like-
what's the, so I would really like to understand this worry with disjunctivist
I mean,
definitions more. At first I try and answer, maybe you can include them in your, so the idea is that you have two kinds of truth makers,
mhm.
right? So you have the powers as one kind of truth maker for modal propositions, and the cognitive capacities as causal powers as truth makers, and and both can fulfill the condition in order to meet the definition. So, and what's the worry
I completely
then?
like that aspect of it. I think that's very like a benefit but what this just means that there's two ways to make it true. It doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it actually has something to do with each other. That if you're capturing something like something being either a table or a chair, I mean these are still related stuff, but either a table or a country, that's not an interesting concept, right? Table or country.
Mhm.
But in this case, in your picture, it seems exactly attractive when both come together.
Mhm.
When you need both truth makers in order for to make a possibility, make something possible, right? It's like it's partially a modal, it's partially an aspect of our logical capacities, but maybe, and also the world plays a role. So I think this is a good start, but it's not a definition of the possibility. It's like you need a longer kind of a disjunction or the disjunction, a consequence of that you have there would be a consequence of something more rich, where they both work together, where the truth makers can enrich each other, and it's not like it's not that you just look for maybe it's possible in the world, in physical powers, or maybe it's in our brain. No, it's two.
Yeah, what is interesting in the account is that we tend to distinguish between physical, metaphysical, and logical possibility. Maybe there are even more kinds of possibilities, and this account can make sense out of that in some ways, because if something is physical, it's made true by the physical powers, and if it's metaphysically possible, then it's made true by the cognitive powers. And if it's logical possible, that's also made true by the cognitive powers. You need then some kind of cognitive laws to distinguish between the metaphysical and logical possibilities. But you can make sense out of these distinctions in the in the modal space. So that's also one benefit you have. But what I want to say is that, of course, the definition can be met by possibilities that are, where there is no physical power, right? So we can think of, processes not being in conformance with the laws of physics as far as we know it, with other physical laws.
So I completely agree with. I think that's a very good aspect of it. First applying a counter physical, counter possibles, counter physically possible. Kind of scenarios. But it seems that my worry is not with this consequence. It is that it would be the definition. Like it seems that there should be something like more interesting, more substantial behind it, from which this should follow as a definition for your possibility.
Because of the disjunction. But what's
because they work together. Like it's always the two coming together, and sometimes it's merely just the fact that we can cognize it, and sometimes it's, and I don't even know what that would mean. It's just the world making it possible. That's kind of a case that I already would have difficulty with. It's usually the two that make it possible. And these are like borderline, like extreme cases where it's only.
But is that really extreme? I mean, yeah, I mean,
the case of counter-physicals, counter-possibles, are kind of extreme, right? I mean, it's not what people think of at this.
I mean, don't we?
But I like that, so I don't mind that. It just should be a consequence rather than a definition. That's the only thing.
Normally, I show a picture of Dumbo, for instance, in that in that talk. So it's an object in an elephant that flies, and
Dumbo.
just think of that it's physically impossible that elephants fly, but it's nobody complains about the idea of flying elephants.
But
Because most people simply
a
don't
flying
know the
elephant
last-
is both. Well, it's not both, but it's cognitively possible. What you have a problem is what would be a physically possible but impossible to cognize, something like that.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Ah, okay. Yeah. It's that would be a
that's true.
case
I don't know
of.
what it means.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we were talking about that. I mean, given the cognitive beings we are, it's possible that there are, law of facts out there that a human being will never be able to cognize.
Yeah, but
And
here you
that
have a
gives us-
definition. Here you have a definition.
Yeah, but that gives you
So you
physical possibilities that are not cognizable,
Hmm.
and still it's physically possible, and nobody will ever cognize it, right?
And that seems kind of plausible.
I mean,
Yeah, but that's that guy, and Wittgenstein,
who's that?
So, founders of our center. It's because it's difficult to say that it could be an object of definition, something that cannot be expressed in any way.
Oh, okay.
Maybe
Ah,
something
okay,
that
that's the word.
another community can
Okay.
express. Okay, that I can understand. So
Yeah, but that's.
these guys, they have a different language.
Mhm.
But here is this definition, you still open the possibility that there could be something that you can define as physically
Yeah.
possible that is impossible in any way to
Mhm.
cognize.
I see.
So is it
I
the
see.
definition?
By anybody,
Is
by,
it the
by any
definition?
being.
Is it the definition?
Ah, okay. Ah, that's so interesting. Thank you. Okay. Mm-hmm. I
It's
see.
maybe not your
No,
objection.
I think it's
Okay.
the same.
I see. That's interesting.
That's why Peter says it always work together.
Yeah, I see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about it. Okay. Let's see what the reviewers say.
Because these guys, like the end of Wittgenstein, they would say God is there.
Yeah,
And you don't.
that's.
I'm not sure you want to go there.
No. I mean, but of course we can think of, I mean, it's possible, is it? I mean, we can think of a cognitive being that in some ways is not limited by its capacities, that has infinite cognitive capacities.
But for us to give a definition, you need to have some kind of negative definition because we cannot conceptualize it.
No.
Round of applause.